Welcome to the Champions of Active Women podcast. In this podcast, we will interview individuals who have been successful within athletics and beyond. We hope that these interviews will encourage and inspire girls and women to be active for a lifetime, to reach their goals, and to break new barriers in sport and life. This podcast is brought to you by the Active Women's Health Initiative and the Sports Medicine Research Institute at the University of Kentucky. The mission of the Active Women's Health Initiative is to optimize health and promote physical activity and wellness for girls and women across the lifespan. We hope you enjoy our conversations and join us in understanding women's health today to ensure women's health tomorrow. Hi, I'm Dee Degonsky, and with me today is Jill Burkeen. Jill is the Information Security Officer at United Southern Bank in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. She also does IT consulting and is a Plexus ambassador. Jill is a certified information systems security professional and holds several other IT-related certifications. She has worked in the information technology, information security field for over 25 years, with most of those years of experience coming from the financial services industry. We are lucky to have her as a supporter of the Active Women's Health Initiative, and she has a great story to tell about her journey with physical activity throughout her life. Jill, I'm so happy to get a chance to talk with you today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you again for being such a great supporter of the Active Women's Health Initiative. And I was wondering if you could just get us started today by telling us why the health of women and girls is so important to you.
Well, as a child, I was pretty active, and I just feel like with being in the technology field, I see so much technology that girls and boys are involved in. And while that part of it is how I make my living, I also see a part of it that is causing a problem with kids being active, and girls specifically. In school, we maybe tend to be active, but as we get older, we're supposed to be the caregivers of our children, our parents, and even our spouse. And I think sometimes we forget to focus on ourselves.
Mm-hmm. It's a great reason to think about girls and why the health of girls is so important. Good. What have you seen? I didn't really think about that angle when we were talking before about being in the technology field and your views on technology. How do you see that impacting either your own physical activity or the physical activity of children today?
I think they tend to, I heard some of your other podcasts and I related really well with it. When we were kids, if we wanted to talk to somebody, we had to either go to their house or things like that.
Run down the road
or whatever. But we don't have to do that anymore. I mean, they're constantly on their phones texting. They don't have to leave the couch. They don't have to leave their bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of instilling that sedentary lifestyle before they even enter the workforce. And then life adds more things to that makes it more challenging to be active. And my son, for one, is more active because he's involved in sports. But once practice is over, the phone's out of the backpack, and they constantly start being involved in texting and social media and things like that. So
yeah.
It's I think it's a great tool if they use it as a tool, but I think it lacks. I know it's important for their age group, but
yes.
For me, looking back, I didn't have that, and so I see it as being a hindrance for a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, and it's not like in some of those situations you were thinking about consciously making this decision to be active. It was just how you went about your day.
It was just part of it, and just like that's part of it to them. I mean, they're used to having it, but and I think for kids who are involved in sports, I think it's they get their exercise, but what about the ones who aren't involved in sports and physical activity already? And that's just more encouraging not to be active.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about your own journey with physical activity over your life?
I was very active as a child, pretty adventurous, always on the go, but I was... we always lived near creeks. I had an older brother, and It wasn't so much competition with him, but I felt like anything he could do, I should be able to do as well. So we were always in the creek or in the woods, and we rode our bicycles all over Murray. I'm from Murray. We rode our bicycles all over Murray, anywhere we wanted to go. I don't feel like my parents worried that much about me at that time. Now you have to worry about your kids going and doing some of those things. So as a parent, I feel like I hold him back a little bit as well on some things like that. But, I was always very active and very competitive. If the skating rink was open on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday afternoon, I was there.
Yeah.
kids just don't do that much of that anymore.
Yeah, they don't have many skating rinks
no,
anymore,
not
right?
many skating rinks anymore, no. But, I was very, very active as a kid. And then I guess organized sports. My first organized sport activity is I was asked to try out for Little League Baseball. It was probably in 1976, 77 time frame. So I made the team, and there were 2 girls in the league at the time.
Okay.
We weren't on the same teams, but it was I never felt like playing. I always was competing with the guys on the playground anyway. So I never felt like that competition, there was any hard feelings or anything like that playing with that. And the coaches were great. They always gave me the opportunities. They let me try to pitch and do things like that. They never tried to hold me back from doing things. So, but then from there I went on and I was involved in basketball. I ran track. I played softball. I played softball even after college.
Okay.
That was my one physical activity that I kept hold of. But I was, very active, probably into my mid-20s, I guess.
Okay. So that's takes us through your mid-20s, and then what happens then?
Started my career in IT. IT was predominantly a male workforce. I was selected over a male candidate, so I felt like I had to prove that I was worthy of the selection. I started in an environment that was banking is usually either in-house or outsourced.
Okay.
I started in an environment where it was in-house, and 2 weeks after I got there, we started flying to different places, looking at bringing everything in-house. So bringing everything in-house meant all the IT responsibilities were on me. So I felt like I had to work harder, stay later, to prove I could do the job and I was worthy of the selection. And looking back, I could think all my sports and everything kind of helped give me that drive, because I never was a natural athlete. I always had to work hard at it. And I think that gave me the abilities to, once entering the workforce, I felt like I had to prove myself and to continue to work hard and to do the right things. My hours were extremely long and extremely odd. It was nothing for me to go in at 8 o'clock. Probably for the first 3 years of my career, I was there at 8 o'clock in the morning and I wouldn't leave till 9 o'clock at night. Oh my gosh. There were times I had to go back. If I did go home, I would have to go back at 9 or 9:30 at night, start it back up, maybe go back in at 1:30, shut the system down, reboot it, bring it back up for everything to come up the next morning. So not all IT jobs are like that, so I don't want to give people who are interested in an IT career like that.
Everyone away from
all
the
women
field
now,
in general.
nobody's interested in IT. But I mean, it was the environment that I started in, and that kept me from being more active. Plus, as a single woman, I bought a home, and in buying a home, I felt like I could no longer play softball, that playing thing.
You lost
I felt
that
like
play
because I thought, you're an adult now. You need to do things that, you've got a house, you've got a job. You can't get hurt, because if you get hurt, you can't pay your house payments. So all those things that came along with that, I kind of got that in my head.
Yeah.
And going from liking to be in a competitive environment to just going to walk, that just didn't do it for me.
Didn't appeal to you.
Didn't appeal to me, not at all.
And I've heard that a lot over time from women, especially like thinking about walking not as exercise and struggling with that activity in particular, even though we know it's one of the best for being active.
Yes.
So I know that recently you've picked activity back up and it's become a priority again. Could you talk about that transition and why you made that decision?
Okay. Several health reasons for doing so. But mostly, having a child and wanting to be active with him, like I said, seeing him not want to be out, trying to prod him to get him to do some other things. So we found hiking. I had been walking before a little bit, not as much as I should have, but so I started walking more so I'd be in better shape. And so, prodding him to get out and hike, was always a challenge. But the most rewarding thing was when we got out to one hike. He said, "Mom, I know you always give me a hard time about getting me out." He said, "And I don't know why I fight you on it." But he said, "When we get out here," he said, "I'm glad we're out here." Oh. So I thought, okay,
that's
all worth it.
That's
motivation.
Know what it is,
yeah,
right?
So that's motivation. So getting him back into interested in something else besides social media was a big driving force. But for me, health reasons, about 5 years ago, I was diagnosed being diabetic. Of course, the lifestyle I had gotten into and not being as active has kind of led me to be more motivated and more conscious about my being more active.
Right.
Definitely, when I do exercise and when I do move, I can see a big difference in my numbers, my daily numbers.
Interesting.
I also know that if I'm not going to be real good with my meal selection, if you're going to go out to eat or something like that, I know that if I can exercise, I can have a little bit more of what I want like that.
Okay.
So it all plays. I've been super hyper focused on that, and my last visit, my numbers were really, really good.
Good.
And hopefully that I can come off my meds next time around.
Good. I mean, that's another set of really good motivation too,
yes.
Right. So I know that recently you went on a really cool trip with your son and were able to do some hiking in Newfoundland, and that included a really big hike up Grossmorn National Park and the Grossmorn Mountain. Could you talk about that experience?
Yeah, it was fantastic. We actually, the whole trip was planned around being a whale, iceberg, and bird adventure. Then we tagged 4 days on to Grossmorn National Park at the end of our vacation. Wasn't really sure. We put hikes in all along the way, so there wasn't one day that we just had a relaxation day. We were out and about all. Our trip started in St. John's. We did a trail at Cape Spear, which was a moderate trail. We tried to do everything moderate and not something real easy, something more challenging for both of us.
Okay.
So we did trails in St. John's, Bonavista, Twilling Gate, and then ended up in Grossmorn National Park. The views of the country were spectacular. I can't. You've seen some of them, so
I have seen the pictures, but it's hard to describe them.
But just the views were fantastic. I told my son, I said, when we get to the top of the mountain, just expect me to cry, because I know I will. But all of the trails, the day before we did the Grossmorn Mountain, since we didn't know we were going to be able to do it, they told us if you can't see the top of the mountain when you start, don't go, because the visibility and you can get disoriented and not be able to get off the mountain. So we did Green Gardens the day before, so that was about almost an 8-mile hike, I think. It was an out and back, and like the last mile we started to get to the ocean. It's out to the ocean and back. People started telling us there was whales, so that got us motivated. So it made the trip more exciting. But just the challenge of the terrain. It was very rocky.
Okay.
It wasn't just necessarily the distance, just the whole type of terrain. Some of the paths that you walked on were washed out. You might have 1.5 foot step down.
Okay.
It was springtime there, so it was very muddy. So it was slow going in some parts.
Yeah.
But I kind of took the mountain like I've kind of been taking my focus on my health, a chunk at a time.
Yeah.
I know my health and my activity is not where it should be. It's not going to get that way overnight either. So I'm taking it a little bit at a time and trying to make improvements and being more active, having a more a focused journey on being more active. And that's kind of how I took the mountain. My son just zoop, right up. He was happy to go on.
Yeah.
But I told him, I said, it's not a race for me.
Yeah.
I just want to finish. So I took it a chunk at a time.
Yeah.
Made it up, and the views at the top were fantastic. Dr. Ireland, she had told us about the trip on the way down. She said usually coming down's a lot rougher.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was right.
She was right. Some wisdom there.
Yeah, a whole lot of wisdom there. But it was, and the knees and the ankles were a problem for me. So just slow going, but we finished. Good.
Well, I was happy to hear that you made it and you got to see the view. And could you talk a little bit about, you mentioned you got into hiking and you got your son into it also, but was that something you had done earlier in your life, or how did you come to hike? How did you find hiking?
We live in western Kentucky, so we're near the land between the lakes. That they have all kinds of trails there, but also while we were traveling, he plays travel soccer. Okay. So it's always a challenge. That's been a challenge of me for my life, and finding time for me to exercise, finding time for Jill time.
Yeah.
And so taking him to all the soccer tournaments and being on the road. So we started, once we got interested in it, because I hadn't been in it, it hadn't been something I'd done earlier in life. We started, every trip that we took for soccer, we would find a trail nearby.
Okay.
And so we would try to work a trail in, and to get us more interested in it. And so it wasn't the same thing that we see at Land Between the Lakes all the time. Mm-hmm. It was up here. We did Raven Run Sanctuary. We went to Cumberland Falls one weekend when we were up here, and did is Eagle Falls, I think, the trail.
I don't know that one yet.
It was pretty steep down and back. It wasn't long, but it was just very steep. Mm-hmm. But the views there were spectacular too. Yeah. So we've tried to work things in like that, so I get a chance to be more active. And it wasn't, but now I just find places everywhere I go. So if I may walk where I work in the county that I work. I may work where he plays soccer at the park. I may walk across Kentucky Lake Bridge. It's nearly 3 miles across and back.
Okay.
So I may do those things. I just tried to find ways that I can work it in to my schedule.
Yeah.
And I didn't do that before.
Yeah. And you probably feel like you're at a place in your career now where you're better able to do that, or more comfortable doing that.
I'm working somewhere different, so I'm not in an in-house environment. I'm back in an outsourced environment.
Okay.
Makes a total difference. So people don't have to get discouraged from being in IT, women especially. But it is. I didn't start my family till late in life, and so now I'm at a little different point in my career, so I can do things different, and I'm in a different environment. And it's just a lot less stressful, other than having a teenage boy.
Well, that's a whole other issue we won't get into today. So in what ways does being active, in what ways is it impacting other areas of your life?
Well, I feel like that I have more energy, because, it's kind of like a vicious cycle. If you don't exercise, you have health issues, and you don't feel like exercising then. So to break that cycle is you have to find a way to do that. Yeah. And I feel like I've done that. And I feel like I don't want to go back to being that way. Mm-hmm. So, I just try to constantly be active, and hopefully somebody else will be inspired and, that needs to move, and they will move as well. I've been taking care of my parents, and, when you tell them they're getting older, and my father was sick, and, mobility, you don't realize it until, if they can't get up and move, they're going to have to go to a rest home. And you don't want to do that. When you start thinking about aging yourself, you don't want to do that. So I think that was a little bit of motivation as well. And I've tried to stress to them, you have to keep mobile. Mobility is the key to life.
Absolutely. It is. And it's one of the things that we often don't think about when we have it. And then as it starts to go away, then that's when it really comes to the forefront. Right. Has being active, especially since you've done much of it with your son, has it impacted your relationship with him at all?
Yeah, a lot. Yes, when we're out there, we don't have the conflict about social media. It's amazing how many of the national parks don't have phone service. Yeah. It's fantastic. But no, I know that's important to them, but I think it's helped bring us closer together, and we both enjoy it. And he's one of my biggest fans for me being more active. He's encouraging. He doesn't always go walk with me, but he encourages me in other ways. So
it's interesting that you don't really have to fight the battle, because it's just not possible to be on social media, and I think something about being in the woods kind of limits the desire to be connected to other people outside. Yeah,
and I think it gives everybody like a sense of accomplishment when you finish a trail that or that's going to be challenging, or you see things you wouldn't see normally. One of the trails we were on was a Skirwink trail, and we rounded the corner one time, and there was a moose standing there. So
well, hello.
Like, oh yeah, hello. But I think it helps. It builds their confidence, and it makes them more realizing that they can accomplish other things.
When you think back over your life, if you hadn't had the chance to be an active kid when you were young, how do you think that might have shaped your life?
I think it for what it did in being involved in organized sports. I had a lot of great coaches. They made me as a girl feel like that I could do anything. Nobody held me back. My parents didn't hold me back. So they were always encouraging me and giving me the opportunities. And like I told you before, I wasn't a natural athlete. I had to work at it. So I feel like it gave me the drive and the motivation to be the hard worker that I am and to help me in my career.
Yeah. How do you think that impacted your perspective about being in a male-dominated career?
Well, it was kind of strange. I didn't really think at first. I mean, I knew I had been selected over a male, but until you go to a conference, an IT conference, you really don't really realize how small of a percent of the population you are.
Right.
When you walk by and the men's bathroom is lined up.
You're in a strange place.
I walked by one time, I said, it really pays to be a woman in IT when you have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
But it does, it was, I never felt like I had to compete against the people on my team. I always wanted to surround myself with good people. You're only as good as your weakest person. So I always felt like I could learn something from anybody who was on my team, whether it be in sports or a professional team. So I just think it helped shape who I was and prepare me for my career and the challenges that came along.
Yeah. What advice do you have for girls or women who are trying to be active or about staying active over your life?
Okay, so I was reading a book the other day, and I seen this quote, so I thought about this.
Okay.
Albert Einstein, life is like riding a bicycle. In order to keep your balance, you have to keep moving. The girls who are already active, keep going. Don't stop. May be challenging to find a sport that you like after leaving the competitive field. But I think that find something you can transition into and that you enjoy. Find somebody to enjoy it with. Then for women who were active at one time who are no longer active, you don't have to climb a mountain. You can, if you just move today more than you did yesterday, and tomorrow you move more than you did today, I think people will meet their health goals and they will be able to find that their life gets back in balance.
That is wise, very wise advice. And I think your perspective and taking it one step at a time and these small changes is a really powerful
You can
approach.
get discouraged if you try to think it's going to happen overnight. You don't stop being active overnight. It's a habit. You get there. So, I mean, you have to start back and you have to retrain your behavior.
Well, I certainly appreciate you sharing your story and your perspective. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think I'm good.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jill, and thank everyone for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Champions of Active Women podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Active Women's Health Initiative and was produced by the Faculty Media Depot at the University of Kentucky. If you enjoyed this episode, you can listen and subscribe to all of our episodes wherever you find your podcasts. For up-to-date information about the Active Women's Health Initiative, you can find us on social media at UKAWHI. Thank you for supporting us as we work to promote health and physical activity among girls and women across the lifespan.